They say the loudest moment of your life is the second right before everything goes black. One second, I was just an office intern worried about a corporate merger. The next, I was in the middle of a tactical death trap. They thought we were an easy target. They thought I was just some nobody from accounting. They were dead wrong. The personal assistant sighed deeply, her irritation palpable as she caught the intern's completely deadpan expression reflected in the car's rearview mirror. Breaking the silence of the commute, she sharply criticized his poor attitude and lack of professionalism, but he remained utterly unfazed. Displaying his characteristic indifference, he crossed his arms and shrugged off her remarks, jokingly attributing his lack of corporate effort to his good looks and natural charm inherited from his parents. Their petty bickering continued back and forth, a familiar rhythm between them, until the personal assistant finally clicked her tongue in sheer frustration and turned her gaze entirely back to the road ahead, actively cutting him out of her line of sight. In truth, he had always deeply despised the very thought of spending 8 hours a day suffocating in a corporate office environment. Yet, through a bizarre twist of fate, he found himself riding in the back seat of a luxury vehicle, heading toward a mandatory 2-week internship at a massive logistics firm. It was a business empire owned entirely by a wealthy heiress's family, and it was his only viable escape route from an absurd predicament. Just days prior, he had been falsely accused of assaulting the heiress and found himself nearly railroaded into a shotgun marriage with her. To de-escalate the volatile situation, the heiress had been placed under the strict, personal supervision of her mother, while he was effectively exiled to the family's corporate office under the watchful eye of his personal assistant. Reflecting on the chaos as the landscape blurred past, he begrudgingly realized the situation could have been much worse. Still, a lingering sense of unease settled over him as he recalled just how dangerously close he had come to crossing an irreversible line with the heiress during their final confrontation. His deep train of thought was abruptly shattered by the personal assistant throwing a piercing glare back at him through the mirror. A look so sharp and hostile it felt capable of drawing blood. The luxury vehicle eventually slowed to a halt, pulling up directly in front of an imposing corporate skyscraper. Stepping out into the crisp air, the intern couldn't help but marvel aloud at the sheer scale of the architecture, which prompted another sharp, hush reminder from his personal assistant to guard his manners. This grand, bustling structure served as the main headquarters of a global logistics group. While he had always known the heiress's family possessed vast generational wealth, seeing this corporate empire in person made him realize they weren't just rich. They were staggeringly, obscenely influential. He quietly followed his personal assistant through the rotating glass doors into a lobby that buzzed with intense corporate activity. He stood there with his mouth hanging open in puro, while she smoothly coordinated their arrival with the receptionist before guiding him toward the executive elevators. They rode the elevator up to the high-security floors just below the executive suite, where the environment grew visibly quieter and more oppressive. The sprawling layout was dominated by wide cubicles and glass-enclosed conference rooms designed for high-stakes deal-making. Standing outside the primary meeting room, the intern consciously straightened his posture and adjusted his clothes, earning a rare, subtle nod of approval from his personal assistant. Inside, they were greeted by the branch's general manager. The personal assistant stepped forward, being respectfully as she introduced the intern and formally noted that he was there to fulfill a 2-week placement on the direct, personal orders of the family head. Hearing this revelation, the manager gasped in genuine surprise, his eyes widening with curiosity as he tried to deduce which powerful family this plain-looking young man belonged to. Before the intern could offer an explanation, the personal assistant quickly and strategically interjected. She flatly explained that the family head had explicitly mentioned owing a profound, unstated debt to the intern's family. The manager leaned back in his leather chair, a warm, overly polite smile spreading across his face as he absorbed the information. He then listened intently as the assistant added another crucial detail. The matriarch of the family had also personally requested that the intern be thoroughly guided through the company's core administrative duties. Stunned by the simultaneous involvement of both the powerful family head and the strict matriarch, the manager openly wondered aloud just how massive of a corporate bigwig the intern truly was. The intern simply laughed to break the mounting tension, keeping his polite demeanor perfectly intact despite the internal panic. He realized with dread that the entire staff was completely misinterpreting his background, treating him like the hidden heir to an incredibly influential dynasty. With her delivery assignment complete, the personal assistant bowed elegantly and departed, flashing a final, non-verbal warning glance at the intern that clearly commanded him to stay on his absolute best behavior. The manager informed him that his official work would begin the following morning once his security credentials and ID badge were processed. He then picked up his desk phone, dialed an internal extension, and summoned his secretary into the conference room. Less than 3 minutes later, a cheerful young woman walked into the room, casually addressing the manager as her father. This sudden breach of corporate etiquette prompted a swift, sighing correction from the manager, who reminded her to use his professional title inside the building. The manager formally introduced her as his secretary and instructed her to guide the intern through an extensive tour of the facility and the primary shipping warehouse. When the intern introduced himself, the secretary pursed her lips and openly mocked his name, calling it incredibly plain and ordinary. Though a nerve was definitely hit, the intern expertly masked his rising annoyance with a forced, good-natured chuckle. The manager quickly broke the awkward silence by explaining that the intern would be serving directly as the new administrative assistant for the duration of his stay, meaning the two of them would be working side by side almost constantly. Realizing the gravity of her mistake, that she had just openly mocked a highly connected VIP backed by the family leaders, the secretary's cheerful expression instantly morphed into absolute, wide-eyed panic. The intern found himself deeply trapped in the center of this absurd misunderstanding, feeling as though he had stepped into an inescapable trap where saying no or clarifying the truth was no longer a valid option. The manager politely excused himself to return to his pending executive duties, leaving the two young adults alone in a heavy, awkward silence. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, the secretary bowed frantically in a state of total panic, blurting out a desperate apology for her previous rudeness. The intern casually shrugged the incident off with a calm face, honestly admitting to her that he was just as clueless about the grand treatment as she was. As he massaged his temples, stressing over the fact that his simple internship had suddenly been elevated to an executive assistant track, the secretary stared at him in utter disbelief. The sheer, overwhelming absurdity of the entire situation finally broke the ice, and a small laugh slipped out of her, quickly followed by his own. Within moments, both of them were laughing uncontrollably, releasing all the built-up corporate tension. Once they finally calmed down, they shifted their focus straight back to business. The secretary offered to lead him out of the room, politely adopting a formal corporate title to address him. When the intern awkwardly scratched the back of his head and asked her to please drop the rigid formalities because it gave him the creeps, she playfully snickered, declaring that the title was entirely non-negotiable. She smiled warmly, remarking on what an incredibly amusing person he was, and took a long, curious look at his face before turning to open the door and lead the way out. Weeks flew by and it felt like a single instant, and the intern's final day at the logistics firm arrived. To his own immense surprise, he had genuinely grown to enjoy the structured routine and the lively atmosphere of corporate life. As he walked through the main entrance for his final shift, the security guards warmly saluted him in unison, smiling genuinely and insisting that he return to visit them so they could treat him to drinks after their shift. At the front desk, the receptionist greeted him with a bright smile and a faint blush coating her cheeks, expressing her sincere gratitude for his time at the company and noting how much livelier the entire office had become solely because of his presence. He offered a humble, polite reply before making his way straight toward the elevators. The moment he stepped onto his assigned floor, an unexpected wave of respect washed over him as every single colleague who caught sight of him bowed with genuine smiles. The secretary quickly hurried toward his cubicle to intercept him, her breath slightly caught. Nearby coworkers playfully teased her for immediately claiming ownership over the intern since his very first day, a ribbing that he quickly brushed off with a polite wave to hide his underlying awkwardness. The secretary informed him that her father, the general manager, required his immediate presence in the main conference room to attend an urgent briefing with a high-profile client representative. Entering the room, they were immediately met with an incredibly solemn, tense atmosphere. The manager initiated the highly classified briefing, revealing that the company had been tasked with a high-stakes government assignment, initiating the immediate ground transport of a top-secret package destined for a secure research institute. As the executive team heavily debated the safest potential convoy routes and the strict defensive protocols required, the intern unexpectedly volunteered to join the active escort team. Trusting his capabilities, the manager officially assigned his daughter, the secretary, to accompany him in the support vehicle to manage the vital transfer documentation. By noon, the entire operation was fully mobilized with extreme haste. The intern sat quietly in the passenger seat of the escort vehicle directly alongside the secretary, who was visibly trembling with anxiety as she meticulously verified the shipping manifests. Directly ahead of them, a massive armored transport truck carried the classified cargo. The entire convoy moved onto the open road in a tightly synchronized, military-style formation, heavily flanked by tactical security details tracking ahead and bringing up the rear. After an hour of completely smooth, uneventful transit through the outskirts of the city, the situation took a sudden dark turn as they approached a major highway intersection. Out of nowhere, 3 heavily modified unidentified vehicles aggressively breached the convoy's formation, perfectly sandwiching the armored transport truck and separating it from the support units. Barely 5 minutes passed before the lead security vehicle ahead was forced to a violent screeching halt. Sensing an immediate aura of extreme hostility in the air, the intern barely had time to process the threat before a deafening catastrophic explosion rocked the front of the convoy, followed instantly by a relentless hail of automatic gunfire. As the secretary panicked and shrieked in her seat, the intern's sharp reflexes kicked in. Spotting an incoming rocket-propelled grenade traveling directly toward their chassis, he lunged across the center console without a second thought. He threw his entire weight over her body, using his own physical frame as a human shield and covering her head with his hand to protect her from the devastating shockwave of the RPG's impact. The driver of their vehicle was killed instantly in the initial blast, but through pure resilience, both the intern and the secretary survived. Realizing the extreme severity of the ambush, the intern knew he couldn't afford to wait for standard security forces to regain control. Terrified and hyperventilating, the secretary gripped his hand with a desperate, iron-tight grip, tears streaming down her face as she begged him not to leave her alone in the wreckage. Recognizing that she was entirely paralyzed by blind fear, he forced himself to be calm and collected. He gently reached out and touched her pale cheek with the very hand she was holding, forcing her to ground her frantic attention and look directly into his eyes. He softly but firmly promised her that he would keep her safe no matter what, and then pressed a reassuring gentle kiss to her forehead to break her panic. His steady demeanor worked, and she finally released her grip on his hand. He immediately called out to nearby security guards, who were rushing forward to join the active firefight, commanding them, with absolute authority, to retreat and move the secretary to a secure distant position behind cover. An order they executed without a moment of hesitation. The intern commandeered a high-caliber handgun from one of the retreating guards and prepared to single-handedly counterattack the ambushers. Harnessing his latent and incredible physical strength, he delivered a powerful kick to the heavily damaged passenger car door, completely shearing it off its hinges to use as a makeshift heavy ballistic shield. Holding the metal door tightly, he charged directly into the crossfire toward the rear of the armored transport, where two masked militants were aggressively attempting to cut through the vault doors. He slammed the heavy metal car door into the first attacker with immense force, sending his body flying backward through the air. Before the second militant could react to the sudden assault, the intern rested his handgun perfectly on the door's shattered window frame and fired a precise sequence of shots. The man dropped instantly, allowing the intern to smoothly seize his discarded assault rifle. Nearby, an enemy heavy weapons specialist crouched low behind a concrete barrier, rapidly loading another explosive warhead into his RPG launcher. Calculating his timing to the exact millisecond, the intern spun and hurled the heavy metal car door with all the physical strength he could muster. The massive sheet of metal cut through the smoky air like a giant razor-sharp blade, cleanly slicing across the edge of the attacker's neck. The force was so devastating that his head snapped off completely, tumbling heavily toward his own comrades and leaving the remaining mercenary squad entirely frozen in pure horror. The intern silently muttered to himself, crediting his brutal past sparring sessions with the wealthy heiress for helping him perfectly master such lethal physical control. Realizing he was the primary threat, the remainder of the enemy syndicate instantly redirected all of their automatic weapons fire directly at him. Moving with supernatural agility, the intern leapt high into the air, landing in a tight kinetic crouch directly on the side paneling of the transport truck to absorb his downward momentum. From that elevated vantage point, he began systematically eliminating the hostiles one by one, sliding along the truck's metal surface with incredibly quick, fluid, and precise steps. The surviving front security team rallied behind his offensive momentum, launching a heavy counterattack that matched his aggressive pace. The intern flawlessly dodged, pivoted, and shifted his weight along the chassis of the truck, each deadly movement flowing seamlessly into the next. Every single step he took and every tactical strike he executed stayed incredibly sharp, perfectly calculated within his heightened field of vision. When the brutal high-stakes firefight finally concluded, a heavy silence fell over the highway as every single hostile was successfully neutralized. The convoy's losses were undeniably severe, with 3 security personnel and their own driver dead among the wreckage. Covered from head to toe in sweat and blood, the intern slowly staggered to his feet, his hands still tightly gripping the warm assault rifle as his chest heaved heavily to catch his breath. He stared up at the vast sky, looking around at the bloody mess surrounding the intersection. The oppressive heavy stench of burning rubber, pulverized metal, and iron hung thick and suffocating in the air. Shaking off the intense adrenaline rush, he shook his head and wiped the dripping sweat from his eyes, his thoughts immediately shifting back to checking on the safety of the secretary. Fleet vehicles of law enforcement, local media outlets, and high-ranking corporate representatives flooded the chaotic scene shortly after. Though he was briefly taken into police custody for formal questioning regarding his lethal combat performance, the immense corporate influence of the heiress's family ensured his rapid uncharged release. Maintaining his characteristically calm, unbothered expression through it all, the intern acted as though nothing extraordinary had occurred on his final day of work. Yet, he remained entirely unaware that this violent corporate finale was about to completely shatter his quiet life, catapulting him into an even grander, far more chaotic global spotlight. What was in that package that a whole syndicate would die for? And what will happen to him now that his internship is over? Leave a like, drop your theories in the comments, and subscribe with the notification bell so you never miss the next update.